Welcome to this explainer. Today we are jumping right into the messy, raw reality of our modern information crisis. We're looking at historian Yuval Noah Harari's fascinating thesis on how technology, trust, and our actual biology are crashing together in the 21st century. It's a wild ride, and we're going to explore exactly why our institutions are fracturing right now, and honestly, what that means for the future of human society.
Okay, let's start off with a massive paradox that Harari uses to frame this whole thing. Imagine you're an alien anthropologist, right? Just observing Earth from afar. You'd probably look at us and ask, if humans are so incredibly intelligent, why are we, collectively, so stupid? Harari gives us this brutal but simple equation. You can take the smartest people in the world, but if you feed them bad information, they're going to make stupid decisions. And today we have the most advanced information tech in history, but it is just flooding our world with absolute junk.
See, there's a big difference between intelligence and wisdom. We humans are obviously a lot smarter than chimpanzees, but that big brain of ours comes with a really unique, built-in vulnerability. It's our capacity for deep, shared delusions. Think about it. You are never ever going to convince a chimpanzee to fight a war or sacrifice itself just by promising it infinite joy in the afterlife. No way. But humans? We do this kind of thing all the time. Our brilliant minds are literally hardwired to believe stories, which means the absolute smartest entities on the planet can also be the most delusional.
Which brings us to Section 1, the information crisis, flooded with junk. Because of this biological vulnerability, we're right in the middle of this crazy, unprecedented inverse shift in trust. For thousands of years, trust was strictly human to human. We relied on institutions, governments, banks, the media, but today, that trust is completely tanking. Yet, at the exact same time, our trust in algorithms is just shooting through the roof. Think about it. People who say they wouldn't trust a human bank manager with a dime are totally fine eagerly putting their life savings into algorithmically generated cryptocurrencies. The trust isn't disappearing, it's just migrating away from humans and straight into the hands of non-human intelligence.
Moving on to Section 2, Democracy as a Conversation. The talk has collapsed.
Now, we usually think of democracy as this high-minded ethical or ideological system, but Harari asks us to look at it differently, to redefine it. At its absolute core, democracy is just a massive conversation. It's a mechanism where millions of people voice their opinions, listen to each other, and try to hash things out. But here's the critical part. Pulling off a conversation on that scale is only physically possible because it's built on top of information technology. First it was the printing press, then radio, TV, and now the internet. If you completely rewire that underlying tech, well, you trigger a massive earthquake in the democratic system itself.
It's actually a structural thing. Dictatorships are incredibly simple. One person dictates, everybody else listens. Boom, no conversation needed. Democracies, on the other hand, are super fragile because they literally require a constant functioning conversation. And what we've seen over the last decade is that despite having the most powerful communication tools ever created, that democratic conversation has pretty much entirely collapsed. We've lost the ability to just listen to each other. And it's not necessarily because our political beliefs are suddenly further apart than they were in, say, the 1960s. It's because the foundational trust you need to converse in the first place has been algorithmically eroded.
Let's look at Section 3, the AI immigrant threat. No visas required.
To really grasp how vulnerable our societal systems are, you don't have to look any further than the cash in a European's pocket. Have you ever noticed that Euro banknotes purposefully feature zero human beings? They only show imaginary, totally fake bridges and windows. Why? Because as Harari points out, the nations of Europe couldn't agree on a single historical figure who wouldn't offend someone else in the alliance, so they went with fake architecture. It's a fascinating detail, but it perfectly illustrates a pre-existing lack of deep, unified trust. And if you build a house with just windows and doors but no solid walls, it's going to struggle to stand.
And that weak foundation is terrifying when you look at the storm that's actually coming. While political parties spend all their time arguing over human immigration, Harari argues the most disruptive immigrants aren't crossing the Mediterranean in boats, they're algorithms. These AI immigrants arrive at the speed of light with zero visas required. And they aren't starting with manual labor, they're coming straight for the top-tier jobs. Think editors, lawyers, writers. They're poised to radically alter local human culture, and crucially, they possess absolutely zero political loyalty to the nations they operate within.
Which leads to Section 4, language, finance, and religion. AI masters words.
The ultimate tool here is language. Because AI is mastering human language, it is perfectly positioned to master finance, which ultimately is just a complex series of stories we all agree to believe. Harari uses this brilliant, vivid metaphor to explain this. Imagine a medieval horse that does a day of hard labor, and in return, you hand it a few shiny coins. The horse sees the physical metal, sure, but it completely lacks the cognitive ability to grasp the story of money. While Harari argues that as AI takes over global trading, it's going to invent financial devices and trading languages that humans literally cannot comprehend. In this scenario, we are the horses.
And this disruption goes way beyond just the stock market. Just look at historical precedent. Back in the 15th century, the printing press came along and allowed everyday people to read the Bible for themselves. That totally broke the monopoly of the priests, right? It directly sparked the Protestant Reformation and a catastrophic fracture of institutional authority. Fast forward to the 21st century, what do you think happens to religions based on sacred texts when an AI can memorize and interpret thousands of years of theological writings faster and better than any human priest or rabbi? The institutional fracture that's coming is going to be completely unprecedented.
All right, Section 5, A New Imperial Era, Return to Conquest.
Harari loves to point out that if you really want to understand reality, stop reading poetry and start reading budgets. Let me give you a staggering number. In the early 21st century, governments globally were spending an average of 10.5% of their budgets on healthcare, compared to only about 6 to 7% on the military. That is mind-blowing. It represents a totally unique window in human history, a period where countries actually felt safe enough from foreign invasion to invest more money in nurses than they did in soldiers.
But Harari warns that this lost golden age is now officially collapsing. He analyzes the Russian invasion of Ukraine as the definitive, undeniable end of the global taboo against territorial conquest. What we're witnessing is a terrifying return to raw, old-school imperial force, where one country simply decides to invade and annex a weaker neighbor by brute force. In this new world disorder, the very definition of peace is being twisted by strongmen. It no longer means harmony, it just means the weak silently doing exactly what the strong demand.
Let's turn to Section 6, Expanding the Human Mind, Containing Multitudes. Zooming all the way down into the micro level of human experience, specifically looking at the conflict in the Middle East, Harari presents a really profound observation. If you look at it in purely objective physical terms, there's actually enough land, enough food, and enough water between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River to build houses and hospitals for everyone. The true shortage isn't in the physical dirt, and it isn't in the water supply. The shortage, he argues, exists entirely in the human mind. Our minds are just so incredibly narrow that we fundamentally struggle to hold the humanity of two opposing sides simultaneously. See, when the human mind is too narrow to contain the existence of two different peoples, the impulse is to try and alter reality itself, usually by attempting to annihilate the other side, so reality finally matches our narrow perspective. But Harari makes this raw emotional plea for radical empathy here. He argues that we must recognize the absolute right to dignity and security for both the 7 million Palestinians and the 7 million Jews living there. We can't just destroy reality to make things simple. We have to do the grueling, difficult work of expanding our own minds so we can contain multitudes.
So what does this all mean for us? That brings us to our final question today, and it's the one thing I really want you to take away from this explainer. We are entering an era where our legacy institutions are breaking down, where AI immigrants will speak languages we can't even comprehend, and where raw imperial power is muscling its way back onto the global stage. As this super-intelligent AI radically reshapes our chaotic world, are we going to retreat into our narrow delusions and allow our humanity to be overwritten, or will we find the wisdom to finally expand our minds? It's a massive question, and something we all need to seriously reflect on. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will catch you in the next one.